Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Atlas Dialogue. As always, it's myself, Ash Mohammed, and joined by Saud. How are you doing, Saud?
Hello, I'm good.
Excellent. And it's this week's weekly roundup. So, Saud, seeing as I kicked off last week, what have you seen this week that's piqued your interest?
Okay, so you've heard about Twitter and what's going on with Twitter these days. And one thing that a lot of people were talking about was that Twitter launched a subscription service for the verification tick, the blue tick mark it has with the name, the handle. I've not been on Twitter for a while, so excuse the terminology, the Twitter handle, I think. And there was a bit of controversy around it, but it seems to be catching on because Meta just announced, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that Facebook and Instagram are also going to be having those verification check marks. They already have them, but they're going to be paid, similar to a subscription model. So it's catching on to other social media networks. They're going to release it in New Zealand and Australia later this week. And
so, what do you get for the tick? Apart from paying for a tick, what do you get for it? Because I guess on Twitter, you know, the whole point of the tick was so to stop people kind of imitating you, and so I think it kind of originally started off with, you know, celebs and famous people saying, you know, I want the special tick that I am who I am. So when I'm Alex Ferguson, it is genuinely Alex Ferguson. But what's the benefit for me and you? You know.
Okay, so what Meta says is that there's going to be three main benefits. The first is that there's going to be higher visibility and reach for people who are posting and sharing content. That would show in terms of when you search for something, that person who's verified will show up higher. Same goes for comments and same goes for recommendations as well. Second benefit would be that you'd have direct access to customer service in case you have any issues or questions. So right. You'll be a priority. And third were different perks and benefits. They didn't share much. I couldn't find much detail on that online, but it's regarding their NFT plans and crypto plans. Verified. It was something like verified users would be able to give tokens to their favorite influencers or content creators, and they would be able to use them further on. Not much detail.
It's interesting because, I mean, I'm kind of not surprised they've eventually gone down this route because, you know, when you've got a platform with, you know, millions, if not billions of users, they've done their best to kind of monetize it, and they've done the data. And obviously, in, you know, success or otherwise, depending on where you read the press, you know, sometimes it's worked out well for them, sometimes not so much. And I think they both try, you know, well, certainly Facebook has done the business and done Facebook business and tried that. But it's interesting on the NFT piece because I've started seeing certainly on certain Facebook threads, you know, or where you go, give me a yes or give me a little tick. People are collecting the social media ticks. And I wonder then if it's kind of, you know, that becomes a way of earning if you're an influencer, which is each one of those things has a nominal value. And then people are now kind of going, give me the tick. And if you give me the tick, it's worth, you know, 0.1 pence, whatever. And therefore, if you got 1 million likes, you know, you've got 10 grand or whatever it is. So it's really playing into the influencer space, isn't it?
Yeah, and trying to, you know, go with Meta's vision of the metaverse and trying to incorporate move social media in that direction. So I think that's good. But how this differentiated from Twitter's subscription verification model was that for Twitter, you just have to pay for it. For Facebook and Instagram, you have to have a government issued ID, which has to be verified. So
a government issued ID?
Yeah.
Which government is that then?
It could be any, depending on the country you're in. Like, could be a driving license or a passport or a ID card, social security, whatever, depending on your geography. So, what I think Facebook is trying to do there is they're trying to stop bots and fake accounts.
Right. Okay. And so you've got to genuinely prove who you are before you do that.
Yep. because a couple of years ago there was a lot of news, negative press around
Yeah,
social media being used for manipulating financial markets or
yeah,
fake
yeah, yeah,
news or public opinion, stuff like that, bullying as well, stuff like that. So I think the verifying accounts with government IDs would ensure that that is reduced as much as
yeah,
possible, because you know who to listen to and who not to, because one is
yeah. And I
verified,
think I
the
think
other
they were.
isn't.
I think certainly in the UK they were trying to pass legislation, weren't they? I don't know if they did in the end to mandate that, which
Yeah.
said you weren't allowed to open up a social media account without actual verification, with a genuine ID like a driving license or a passport. So maybe this is kind of Facebook and Twitter trying to get ahead of the curve because they can see which direction governments and people are going. Because I guess people are genuinely kind of one and it's linked to the point I'm going to kind of talk about, which is bots and people being worried about false accounts and people being worried about being manipulated by social
Hmm.
media for one thing or another, and then you suddenly start losing faith in what you see and hear,
Yeah.
which is kind of surprising because when you look at some of the stuff on Facebook, you kind of go, really? Is that's I don't think I've ever believed it. However, you kind of people who do almost go to social media for their news
Hmm.
start then kind of going, well, hold on a minute, how is this accurate?
Yeah.
And then that starts impacting their other income stream, which is
Hmm.
Facebook business.
Yeah.
Because if you can't trust the business, then you're certainly not going to go and click on it and make a purchase.
Yeah.
So you kind of feel it's a bit of self protection, but
Yeah.
also kind of there's a customer need there about knowing I'm talking to another person and that person has been verified independently somewhere,
Yeah.
and I'm not talking to some random or a bot. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes the whole platform more legit and makes people
Mm.
comfortable spending money using it and
Yeah. Yeah.
actually consuming content on it as well.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at one of the benefits in terms of higher visibility and high reach that I
Yeah.
mentioned, I think another insight that we can get from this is that 10 years ago, 5 years ago, social media used to be about connecting with people, talking to people from high school who you've not met for years, but
Yeah.
knowing what's going on in their lives and
Yeah.
sharing what's
Yeah.
going on in your own lives. It used to be about being able to connect with people. Now, I feel that there's this trend towards creating and consuming content.
Yeah.
So it's I think this verification and increasing your reach and everything is focusing towards that side of the game a
Yeah.
bit more.
Yeah, and it kind of,
Uh,
to your earlier point about metaverse, I mean, it plays into that space, doesn't it? Because, if you think most kids under the age of 12 or 15, social media is where they consume TV, entertainment, news, anything and everything is all consumed through social media. They rarely switch on TV and go, I'm going to check the news channel. So that but they're also then it's where the gaming's done.
hmm,
So, and then their purchasing is done that. So, we talked about this in one of our podcasts about, NFTs and how, depending on if you're a certain age, like the thought for me about buying a virtual token just seems a bit random because it's virtual.
hmm,
But for my daughter who's 10, it seems actually quite sensible because you go,
yeah,
yeah, but that's my avatar in the game. That's how I'm perceived.
hmm,
So therefore, you buying a pair of Nike trainers for yourself to look good walking down the street, it's the same if my avatar walks down the street with a really bad set of gear. Whereas if I get some really nice stuff from with an NFT, then I'm happy to do that.
yeah,
So yeah, it's quite interesting. No, that's a good one.
yeah.
Right. So
I think that was interesting. So yeah. So what do
yeah,
you have?
my kind of connected one is a generative AI.
Okay.
Um, so just I'll kind of explain that. So you obviously have heard of AI,
Hmm,
and there's AI usually is based on you've got a set of data, and then the AI goes and looks at that data, and then almost needs tons of data, and then it kind of essentially does machine learning, and it's
yeah.
able to replicate processes. It's able to respond via chatbot with a series of questions. But it's presenting what you've already keyed in. So it's not
Hmm,
it's not kind of creating anything new.
yeah.
What generative AI is it takes the data, but what it does do is it creates something. And you've probably seen this on Facebook very recently, where you can key in it, write in a sentence, and it'll draw a picture of that
Hmm.
sentence.
Yep, yep, yep.
And you've seen all these apps floating around where it says, draw William Shakespeare snowboarding,
Yeah,
and then William Shakespeare is snowboarding, and you're like, how the heck do they do that?
yeah.
And they've even done things where you can ask it to write a song or a poem, and you
Hmm.
can say, I want a poem about Keith Chegwin, climbing Mount Everest, and it'll write one for you. And
Hmm.
so it's hence the name generative AI. So what it's doing is it's creating, actual content,
Yeah.
and it's creating, content that you would normally get. People would be saying that's the difference between us and robots, which
Hmm.
is robots play back the data, but
Yeah.
actually only humans can create original content, and that's
Hmm.
what generative AI does. And some of the places it's being used quite a lot is copywriting. So if you think about the millions of magazines, websites, news, social media, blogs, all of this cool stuff, right? Tons and tons of copywriting required. Now there's a few out there. I think there's one called Jasper AI and Chat GPT. A few of them out there that have the ability to basically create content. So you
Yeah.
could say, could you write me a piece about why there was a 2-2 draw with Man United versus Leeds on the weekend,
Hmm.
and this thing will go away and write you a piece, and you can
Yeah.
even say it has to be 2,000 words, and I want you to focus on X, Y, and Z, and then the bot off it goes and it creates original content for you, which is absolutely crazy, mind blowing in terms of like genuine true AI. So yes, that's the thing that really piqued my interest this week.
Yeah, that is quite. It's quite. Everyone's talking about it these days.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of Chat GPT as well. I've used
Yeah.
used that one where you said you enter a sentence and then it makes a picture. I was playing around
Yes.
with that a bit. Scary how they can just combine two seemingly opposite things and make a very
Yeah. Yeah.
nice picture out of that. Uh, I used a Chat GPT as well, just random stuff, and then I think the interesting thing is that it's a lot more two way. It's than
Yeah.
traditional searching on search engines.
Yes.
Like you
Yeah.
can ask it to, okay, write me, let's say a LinkedIn post. I didn't write a LinkedIn post from ChatGPT, just
We
saying,
should
but
do that actually. We should post our next one having written by
we should
generative
ask it to write a script for our next video.
AI.
Uh, Yeah, but I asked it to make a LinkedIn post, and then it wrote a good LinkedIn post, and I said, okay, make it funnier. They made it funnier, and then I said, make it more
Yes.
funnier. They made it more funnier, as much as an AI can. But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
actually you
Yeah.
can
This
actually.
explains why some of your jokes are so funny. So.
Oh,
Um,
that's all me, Ash. That's all me. Uh, um, but another thing you mentioned when you said they work with data sets and
yeah.
copyright, I actually read the past week that one of those platforms which made pictures, the data set they took pictures from was not open source,
Yes.
and there was a and some people were suing that platform.
Yeah. It's Getty Images basically. Um, it's one of the ones where you can kind of put in a sentence and it'll draw you a picture,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because their software is open source, so you can
Hmm.
tell exactly how they've trained the AI,
Yeah.
and they basically put hundreds of millions of Getty images through it, and so obviously Getty Images were, not happy with that
Hmm.
because they didn't get their permission, so they're suing them.
Hmm.
But it's quite interesting because they kind of compared it to when music streaming first came out,
Yeah.
and might be before your time, Sal, but there was a company called Napster. Did you
Yeah.
ever hear of Napster?
I've heard of it, not used it, but
Yeah,
I've heard of it.
yeah. So I like the way that was the legal. I've not used it just in case, but it's kind of like it's basically what Spotify is today,
Yeah.
except they didn't have permission from the artist to do it.
Hmm.
But because obviously the information's out there, what Napster did was it just said well, if you want to listen to a song by Michael Jackson, for example, then you can just come to our platform and stream it. And eventually the law caught up with it and they got sued and it closed down. But this is the same principle, which is to say, who owns the original content? So if this, copywriting AI suddenly went, I'm going to look at The Independent, The Guardian, and all these kind of like newspapers, and I'm going to learn how they write pieces, and then I can write a piece just as good, if not better, within seconds at zero cost. Then is that intellectual property, or have you just learned the same way a human would learn how to go on a journalist course and write a newspaper? So it becomes really kind of complicated as to who owns the content then.
And that's exactly what the debate's about as well. You mentioned it as well, that the thing that people are talking about is originality. Did you create it? Is it original? And then there are people on the other hand saying, well, nothing's ever original. You've always got an inspiration to work from. So I think that's we'll have to see where regulation goes with this, because when it comes to AI, NFTs, crypto, any kind of new technology, even the internet in the beginning, it's always a little shaky until regulators catch up, and then that's when trust builds and you can actually go forward with it on a mass scale.
Yeah, and no, I completely agree. And the interesting thing with this is there's a few of them that are open source, so you kind of see how the AI works. And I think Chat GPT is open source, and whereas some of them, others aren't. So then it becomes very difficult, because if this thing has absorbed hundreds of millions of lines of text, how do you really know what was what it took versus what it's copied versus what it's learned from? And so it becomes very tricky. But it's interesting because you suddenly then see a shift it's one of these kind of shifts in the industry. And I think we talked about it again, one of our previous podcasts about, in 10 years time, the jobs that exist, haven't been invented yet. There's some cool fact which says that 6-year-olds of today are going to do jobs that aren't been invented yet. And I think when, we talked about this, we use examples like, drone technology and NFTs and metaverse and all this sort of stuff but actually here's another one now, because you kind of go, well, if you're a journalist or you're a copywriter or you're all these kind of artistic industries where it's all about the originality and it's all about creation. Suddenly you go, well, what would happen if overnight you didn't have to do that, or every time now you've got the illustrators who spend 5-10 years of learning how to illustrate. Imagine how quickly you could write a comic now. What about, if you wanted to do a Disney animation? Do you have to hire hundreds of animators and take 10 years to make an animation? Or could you now just get one of these bots to go look at every single animation we've ever made, and now I want you to write a story about X and Y, about a spaceman who meets another cowboy, and they go and do it. Could it actually start creating genuine animation and make movies that are animated? And so the kind of the options become endless. But you can then suddenly see all these creative industries, going, wow. And so yes, I feel it's another one of these things we keep talking about, at the cusp of this change where suddenly it's kind of like, it feels like a really big new invention that I don't think we've really learned how to use it. We're just kind of playing with it. And we're kind of, we're using social media to take pictures and send it to our friends, sounds juggling an octopus or something. And then, it's a picture of you juggling an octopus. But yeah, it's quite exciting.
And as you said, it's right at the start. Like, something's going to happen, something's going to change very quick, because the past 2-3 years they've been quite pivotal in terms of technology, fintech, NFTs, and I'm sure the next year or so won't be that much different. It's going to be a big change. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And if you want similar content, check out our other videos.